In this section of the course, we're going to look at a result sheet. We're going to learn how to explain the in-body metrics like we're talking to a fifth grader, so in simple terms, and we're going to understand how those three key questions, what are your goals, what have you tried, what do you need the most help with, how they tie into this explanation. So based on the type of in-body machine you have, you're going to want to figure out where all these metrics line up, and maybe some of these aren't on your actual result sheet, but I think it's important to understand what they are anyway. So we've got two sheets here. We have an in-body 570 result sheet, and we have an in-body 580 result sheet. And I'm going to start with a couple of different things on each one. And just remember that you have the ability to customize your result sheet based on the outputs that you want on it. Now, what I think is really important here is something that's actually displayed on the 570 result sheet, but it's not on this 580, and that's the control. This is where I want to start. I want you to imagine that somebody steps on our in-body machine, they do a scan, and now you've got this sheet in front of you. How do you sit down? How do you orient yourself? How do you explain this? So I'd come to a table, or if you want to, again, really have someone feel like you care about them, there's nothing wrong with just sitting right next to them. Our machine sits out in our lobby. We've got a few chairs out there, and if it's not busy in the office, I'll go out there and I'll just sit right down with somebody. I also like to have a pen and a hard surface to write on because I want to take some notes for that person, kind of highlight and circle some areas that I want them to focus on. So the first area that we're going to focus on is this control right here. And with the control, what we're looking at is that very first question. So imagine this. Hi, Jane. Here's our result sheet. I'm going to walk through this with you, and I want to keep things simple so that we can walk away understanding exactly what these metrics mean without overcomplicating things. And my goal is to make sure that you have an understanding of where you're at, and I have an understanding of where you want to go. So let's start here at the top with this body fat and lean body mass control. All this is saying is this is roughly the amount of body fat mass that we have to lose and roughly the amount of lean body mass that we have to gain to be in a healthy range. Now, this is what InBody says, but your goals for yourself might be different. And Jane, my goals for you, if I was coaching you, might be different as well. So when I say that, what are your goals? And just be quiet, all right? So when you ask that question in that way, and you notice the genuine care in which I said, slow down here, because odds are people are going to have something to work on, and they probably don't feel great about it. For some people, when they see that they've got 18 pounds of fat to lose or 100 pounds of fat to lose or whatever it is, or they've got muscle to gain, they're probably aware of it to begin with, but seeing it right there and having you sit next to them, a little bit overwhelming. So notice what I did there. I didn't say you have to lose and you have to gain. I said, according to InBody, we've got 18 pounds of fat to lose, and we've got 9 pounds of the good stuff, lean body mass to gain. Frame things as we, especially when there's areas for improvement. If a client has a good reading or something that stands out, you've done a great job. High five. If there's areas for improvement, it's we have this to work on. Putting yourself in the seat next to the client makes them feel like you're a part of a team, you're in it together versus singling them out. Trust me, changing the word you to we makes a huge difference. Then slowing down and just asking the question. So Jane, you might have different goals for yourself. And if I was coaching you, I might have different goals for you as well. But when you see this, what are your goals? And then lean in, get a little quiet at the end, and just be quiet. Let them answer. They have goals, and I promise you they've thought about it before. And when they give you an answer to that question, then you have what's going to help them achieve that goal. Whatever program, protocol, or service you're offering, you have the answer. When they tell you that they've got a goal, boom, they're locked in. So that's why that question is so important. And I always like to start here with this control group. Okay, from there, you can go in a number of different directions, but I typically come over here to this body composition analysis section. And this will be the same on the 570 or the 580. Really, the whole left side here is going to be very similar. or even on 970 or 770 for the most part, right? So the way in which we explain this is weight is 135 pounds, 47.4 pounds of body fat is the pounds of fat on our body. Notice our body. Lean body mass is everything that's not fat. It's hair, muscles, water, bones, skin, all those things. Water, total body water. We carry water in two places. Inside of the cells, intracellular water. Outside of the cells, extracellular water. We're going to talk more about this a little bit deeper. Dry lean mass, minerals in the body. So in-body machines actually don't measure fat directly. They measure water, and then they measure minerals. And then what's left over is how we figure out what body fat is. So hydration plays a key role in in-body scans. And this applies to any bioimpedance device. So helping people understand that, where hydration is really important and water balance makes a difference, could go a long way because it will almost save you in certain situations down the road. Maybe they don't have a great reading, and it could be because of a water imbalance. So just framing that up front might help you out down the road. Okay. Muscle fat analysis. I think this is a great opportunity for a visual. If we were to connect the endpoints here, again, if we can see where this forms the letter C. My first goal for the people that we work with is to line these up and form the letter I. So when we read this result sheet, here's what it means. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. Anything in the left in this black area with the down arrow, that would be below an average range for people of your height, gender. Anything in the middle is in an average range. That's this lighter gray section. Then anything in the right in the black would be above average. Some cases, maybe too much, depending on what we're looking at, right? So my goal first would be to line these metrics up right in the middle here, forming the letter I. So that means weight, maybe it comes back a little bit, but we don't ever focus on weight. What we focus on is getting muscle up to a strong level and bringing fat back a little bit to line up with muscle. And then weight's going to do what it does. Does that make sense? And then let them answer. Yeah. Now, what's really cool is long-term, we love to form this big D curve where muscle from a proportional standpoint stands out more than weight and fat. That's a really good sign of health. So drawing that connection there so they can visualize that, I think, is really important. And again, you can stop and ask, so, Jane, have you tried things to maybe build muscle in the past? Yeah, I've tried this or I tried that. Remember, in the gym space, what a great opportunity to sell somebody on personal training or the classes that you offer. If you're in the medical space, maybe in today's world, maybe it's hormone treatment. Maybe it's peptides. Maybe it's lining them up with the right physical therapist or somebody else in your clinic to work with. There's so many different things can be framed around each section of this result sheet. Okay, let's move on to the obesity analysis here. We don't ever look at BMI. BMI just says for every inch we are tall, we're supposed to weigh a certain amount. Old school, use the military medical space, insurance worlds, we get it, but we're going to focus on percent body fat. So again, anything in this gray area is kind of that healthy range. And for women, 18 to 28% body fat is typically a healthy range. So my goal would be to get you somewhere in this gray area. Does that sound like something you'd be interested in? Yeah, and just let them answer, right? And so from here, you might pop over to visceral fat, or you might pop over to segmental fat analysis. So let's just say we go up to segmental fat. Now, percent body fat only tells part of the story. How we're carrying that fat is the rest of the story. So of course, everybody's going to carry more fat in their trunk. Me too. And this is a percentage of the fat in each area of the body as it corresponds to that healthy range. And I know what you want. Same thing everybody wants. Oh, I just want to lose that belly fat. I don't care if I have fat in my arms and my legs. You know, it doesn't quite work that way, right? And you kind of smile and slow things down. As much as what I want to tell you that we could go out and do 1,000 sit-ups and get 6-pack abs and just keep the fat on the arms, it doesn't work that way. Lifestyle, how we exercise, the food we eat, all those things play a role. And fat is just going to come off of the body for the most part proportionally. You might lose a 1/4 pound of fat in the arms, and then maybe you lose a couple pounds in the trunk, maybe a 1/2 pound of fat in the legs. This isn't something that we can spot train. And everybody carries more fat in their trunk. And that is directly correlated to our visceral fat here. And so there's two ways that the in-body will display visceral fat. Visceral fat level, which is a broader view. And I think for a lot of people, this is a simple way to understand it. Generally speaking, anything under 10 is in a healthy range. Anything over 10 is starting to get out of that healthy range, right? So the way that I frame this for clients is 10 is our goal at a minimum. I'd like to get you in single digits. Anything 5 or less is really good. And so if we look at the 580, for example, we don't have visceral fat level, we have visceral fat area. And what this is saying is that as we age, we would generally expect there to be an increase in body fat. But our goal is to stay under this midline, under 100. 100 is the equivalent of 10 for visceral fat level. This is just a more granular view. Instead of looking at it as a level, it's measuring it in centimeters squared. And I think for most people, again, when we're thinking about trying to keep things simple for them, I just like visceral fat better. I think it's hard even for me to visualize what is centimeters squared. How much is that? I don't know what that is from a volume standpoint, but I can understand that 9 is better than 10, that 6 is better than 9, that 10 is better than 20. That makes sense for most people. But if you're going to use visceral fat area, the goal is to stay in this light gray range. And hey, if you were 60 years old and you're right here, that's awesome. But generally speaking, anything under this midline is really good. The other thing that lets you do is show changes more often. So for example, somebody might be at 128.3 and the next time they come in, they're at 128.1. That is a really cool way to show them change. But what would look like for visceral fat level is they probably stayed in a 12 for both scans, and you wouldn't necessarily see that change until they got to an 11. So again, everybody seems to be very conscientious about their belly fat, I think, for the most part. So pointing that out, and then you can tie this back into heart disease. You can tie it back into, all those things, because visceral fat plays a huge role in long-term health. And you can frame those conversations based around the services and protocols that you're offering. Okay, so I'm going to stay here on this result sheet. We're going to go into the segmental lean analysis. And I think this is so important because there's a lot on here depending on the type of machine you have. But we're going to start with just the muscle side of things here. So to explain this, it's going to point out the pounds of lean body mass, like 38, 4, 4.3, 11.46, or 11.27. Okay, so those are the pounds. And then underneath the pounds, you'll see the numbers 99, 95, 97, 82, and 80. Those are the percentages that you have for that minimum healthy amount, is how I like to explain it. So again, Jane, my goal would be to line you right up, if this line is straight, in the middle of a healthy range. So when I look at this, it says, hey, we need to work on the strength in our legs. And that would be my focus. So if you're in the clinical space, lots of things you can do, different protocols or treatments you can provide somebody with to help build muscle, right? If you're in the gym space, what a great opportunity to sell the services that you offer directly, training, classes, personal training, whatever it is, right? And then as you talk to people, depending on their age, sarcopenia is a real thing. Osteoporosis is a real thing. And strength training is super important. So when you see things like this, it does open up the door for broader conversations. And one thing to remember, I always like to look at 100 as the minimum healthy amount. You can always have more than that. 110% is better. But the other thing that this does, looking at it segmentally, is it's going to point out imbalances. I've had 2 elbow surgeries in my left arm. So for me, I've got more lean body mass on my right arm, and I can see that. But let's say that somebody hasn't had surgeries, and you'll just notice where there's a half a pound difference in one leg or the other. Maybe more unilateral training is something they can focus on. Or maybe they actually have an injury they didn't know about. We can see that over here on the right side. So let's take a look at your ECW to TBW. And we have it displayed on the 580 as a whole body, and then we have it displayed here segmentally. So what is this saying? This goes back to the top of the result sheet, right, in which we had the extracellular water, intracellular water. We're now displaying this as a ratio in the body. So when we look at that, your ECW to TBW is saying, in this case, Jane has 39.8% of the water in her body sits outside of the cells, extracellular water. So what's good and what's bad? So here's how you explain this without overcomplicating it to a client, or one way to do so. Jane, this ECW to TBW ratio is really important. It can be an indicator of a lot of things. It's an indicator of inflammation in the body, of edema, maybe from like intense exercise or an injury or something like that. From a nutrition standpoint, we can carry more extracellular fluid if we're eating highly processed foods because they're higher in sodium, and sodium draws water outside of the cell. So I like to look at this because it's a sign that there's something going on from a health standpoint on a deeper level, more than just fat and muscle, right? So 0.360 to 0.390, kind of our healthy range to be in. Now, my goal with the people that I work with is get them as close to 0.360, where 36% of the water in their body sits outside of the cells. So I know that might not seem like a lot. Between 36 and 39, it's only a 3% difference. But during that small 3% window, there's massive amounts of change that can take place, and it makes a really big difference from a state of health standpoint. So what I see is very transparently, we do have some inflammation going on. We've got a lower muscle mass in the lower body here in the right leg and left leg. And we also have a higher water ratio, some inflammatory markers here when you figure out what's going on. Right? For me, as an example, very transparently, taking peptides one time. And for me, I had a lateral knee issue, my left knee. When I was squatted parallel, it felt like somebody stabbing me in the outside of my left knee with a knife. And I feel like I'm pretty good at this stuff. I've done it for years. Like I know how to rehab. I laid off, didn't squat for months, and I just couldn't seem to heal it up. And a buddy of mine, for talking in depth with him during that entire time, said, hey, you need to try this peptide and this peptide. Say for what those were for later. But long story short, 2 weeks in, I felt incredible. I had no more knee pain. Okay. And what I saw on my in-body scan segmentally was that my inflammatory markers, or my ECW to TBW ratio in my left leg, was higher than it was in my right leg. And it was pretty significant. I was in the 0.38s in my left leg, while the rest of my body was in the 0.36s. So again, when there's an acute injury like that, you can see it pop up on the result sheet. And I think that is so cool, because maybe you are doing peptides, and don't let that be me pushing peptides on you, just sharing a story with you, right? But I wouldn't have believed it if I wouldn't have seen it. Now, having seen it, I think it's pretty cool. Now, I did that for 6 weeks and have never taken them since. But when I could see those inflammatory markers go back down to a baseline level in the 0.360s, made all the difference in the world for me. And so relaying those, or sharing anecdotal stories to a client, or even sharing one of another client, I think can really help people to understand and relate to things. So again, generally speaking, Jane, we'd love to see our water ratios close to 0.360, but we just want to keep it in this range. And if we start to get, 4 or higher, there probably is something going on, some inflammatory marker, something going on in the body. And this ratio is directly tied to phase angle. Now, you're not going to have this on the 570. Phase angle. Do some research. This is originally used in hospice care decades ago, right? The lower the phase angle for somebody, generally speaking, maybe the less time they had to live, or they can tell when they're in a disease state. So how do we explain this simply for clients? Jane, phase angle is really cool. And I like to get excited here, right? And this is why we have these machines. Jane, phase angle is really, really cool. It goes into your cellular health. And what do I mean by that? It's measuring 2 things. It's measuring resistance, the amount of time it takes the current to flow through the cell. Generally speaking, the more well hydrated that cell is, the more water that sits inside of it, the more time it's going to take the current to pass through. It's almost like going and walking down the hallway here. Just air resistance. But jump in a swimming pool and walk through it, a lot of water resistance. And that's a good thing in this case. We want our cells to be well hydrated because they're going to perform better. It's also measuring reactants, how the current reacts to the cellular membrane, how it's passing through that cellular membrane. The stronger that the membrane is, the outside part of the cell, right, the healthier it's going to be. So Phase angle is measuring two things: resistance, and through the cell, or what hydrated it is, and cellular integrity or cellular strength with that cellular membrane, how it reacts, resistance and reactance. Now, whatever math formula is done on the back end, that's above my pay grade. And you kind of joke around and smile about it. You don't always have to have all the answers, right? But whatever math formula is done, it gives you this angle here. So what's good? Generally speaking, somewhere in the 4 to 6 is an okay range for women, and 5 to 7 for men is kind of in that healthy range, but no different than the ECW to TBW, where I say I'd like to see our clients at 36%. For women, I'd love to see you closer to 6. And for men, closer to 7. Now, women get into the 7s, that's elite. Men get 8 and above, that is really, really, really good. But these two things are related, because if there's more inflammation in the body, more extracellular water, there's going to be less water inside of the cells. They're going to be less hydrated, and you're going to see phase angle go down. And then the inverse is true. If this improves, you're going to see phase angle go up. But what I'm looking at is this, and this is where I think it's so powerful, is here, our water ratios appear to be okay in the right and left arms. But there is a massive difference in your right and left arm when it comes to phase angle. Look how much lower phase angle is in the right arm when compared to the left. There's something going on here. And same thing here. We're very similar in the legs, but from a phase angle standpoint, there's something going on in a right leg. Now, how you frame the services that you offer around this conversation is going to vary from business to business. But if I go back to that peptide example, this is another thing that I noticed, that my phase angle, after taking peptides for a couple of weeks, my knee did go back in line with my other knee, or my leg went back in line with my other leg. It was really cool. And so I was able to see that on the result sheet, and it made a huge difference. If you're coaching athletes, if you're in the gym space, this could be a sign when maybe people need to take a break from activity, right? Think about an overhead athlete, maybe a volleyball player, a baseball player that's thrown a lot or hit a lot. They might have inflammation in that throwing arm, right? Or in that dominant arm. They need to lay off until it gets back. These are all ways to get people on your in-body scan for more and more scans, more often, more regularly. And every time you put them on the in-body, it's a chance to sell them another service you offer. It's another chance to build a relationship. It's another chance for a conversation around your business. So that's why I think these things are so important. Again, keep it simple, right? I love that example of walking through a swimming pool, resistance and reactance, that's phase angle. Okay, then we're going to make our way down to body composition history here. And the one thing I want to convey here is just trends. One scan never tells the whole story. It can be a great starting point. It can tell us where you're at on that day. But what I'm really looking at is trends over time. So it's so important for us to do regular in-body scans. Come in and scan every couple weeks so we really know how you're improving. Because again, one scan is never going to tell the whole story. And generally speaking, we want to see skeletal muscle mass stay the same or go up. And we want to see body fat mass go down. So if these two things are moving in opposite directions, I think we're doing something really, really well there. All right. So skeletal muscle mass goes up, body fat mass goes down. Weight's going to do what it does naturally. And the percent body fat will go along with the fat and muscle. So using this section down here to talk about trends, but bringing it back to doing regular in-body scans, so important. So Jane, let me ask you a question. You've seen how we kind of broke this down, and I know you told me about your goals and you'd love to lose that 18 pounds of fat, but what have you tried in the past? What? I tried XYZ diet. I tried this training program. No, it worked for a while, but I didn't get results. Right? So for me, it's always, and I can relate to that. So many of the people that we've worked with have tried things, but for me, this needs to be something that's sustainable. So my goal as a coach is to help you establish healthy habits that are going to last a lifetime. And here's how our nutrition program does that. And here's why our average person works with us for 9 months. It's not a quick fix. I'm going to be very honest about that. I'm not going to change your life in 2 to 3 months, but I can change it in 9 or 10 months. And if I can set you up for success forever, I'd be pretty happy, right? Yeah, I would. And what I've done there is I talked about sustainability. I talked about the fact that we're going to work together for a lengthy period of time, right? So I set the stage up front that we're going to have a relationship together for a while. And that's important because recurring revenue is important in our business. And then the final thing might be, and you can drop that question in whenever you think it's appropriate, but the final thing is going to be, and can I ask you something? What do you feel like you need the most help with? Is it accountability, motivation? Is it knowing what the right answers are? What is it? And just be quiet and let them answer that question, right? So that's how you tie all this thing in. And remember, whatever they need help with, you've got the answers. So now you have a general overview of how to explain things simply, and everybody's going to do this differently, right? You can dive deeper into all these metrics in our interactive PDF that we have in your resource library, right? And you can really learn what each section measures. There's so many valuable resources out there, but I think what's important is that you learn how to frame the services that you offer in your business around the result sheet. And those three questions: what are your goals? What have you tried? What do you need the most help with? Will make all the difference in the world. That's how you tie in those questions to the result sheet and you grow your business around your embodied data.